Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Coaching from the Heart. I am your host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me as always is my co-host, good friend, and coaching colleague, Harold Feddersen.
Hi, Tyler.
Hey Harold, it's good to be back with you again this week.
Yep, good week.
Yep. So today's topic is opening the door to compassion. And I'm really excited about this one because uh, like a lot of our topics, compassion is relevant. It's so relevant to everybody's day-to-day experience of life. But before we jump into that, as always, I want to just give people a place where they can find the both of us, because as most of you probably know, Harold and I are both professional transformative coaches. That's what I call it. Harold might call it something different. But we work with people to help them have more and more wonderful and peaceful experiences of life. And so if you're interested in working with us on a deeper level than just this show, you can feel free to reach me at coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And Harold, where's the best place to find you?
Home base, www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. And I believe there are links at the bottom of the page if you want to just click and not type. so, so without further ado, let's jump into the topic at hand, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Harold, to start us off today. So it's
Awesome.
all yours.
So this show comes from a request from one of our faithful viewers, a good friend of mine, Miss T. So compassion. Boy, there's a lot of different angles we could take to this. So we'll just start up in the head, and then slowly we'll just take the elevator down.
That's how we tend to do it. So
Yeah. So we'll start with just some terminology and definition. So compassion, empathy, and sympathy. So compassion is, when when our heart is moved towards someone else or towards ourselves. Empathy is when we relate to someone's suffering because we've had the same kind of suffering. And then sympathy, which is my least favorite, because of the very egoic flavor of it. It has a kind of either subtle or very overt superiority to it, right? If you feel sympathy for someone, you there's like almost an aboveness to them. So we're gonna chuck that one out the window, but I wanted to put it in there because it's commonly associated with the others. So I think the easiest way to enter the conversation of compassion is it's anything that just calls to your heart. It's like in a way you don't have a choice. You just feel your heart moved by something. Usually it's related to suffering of some form, either within ourselves or with others. Normally it's others. As with a lot of the things we talk about, we usually start with the other until we mirror it back to ourselves. So that's kind of the intro to it. Tyler, do you have a similar or different experience?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I like how you made some distinctions between some different words there, because I think they do get confused pretty commonly. And to me, compassion is sort of um, an outpicturing of an inward condition that to me, looks a lot like love. And not I know we've talked about love quite a bit in the past, but just kind of a sort of a deep spiritual love, not necessarily for a specific person, but just kind of an experience of love. And that sort of, I think of compassion kind of in the same vein as kindness. And to me, they both look like sort of if we say, oh, that person's being compassionate towards that other person, or that person's being compassionate towards themselves, there's something we're seeing there that to me looks and feels a lot like love. But it's sort of love in form, if you will. So it will look like something, but it doesn't have to be specific. Like there's not this list of things that are specifically compassionate you can do, and these list of things that are not compassionate. If you're coming from a place of love, it will show up as compassion or kindness. That's kind of how I think about it, at least. It's not necessarily cosmically true, because it's just a word, right? And as A Course in Miracles says, words are but symbols of symbols. so, so they're not a direct experience of the truth. So you guys might mean a little bit something else by the word compassion. But I think one of the things I just wanted to bring up with this topic is we have sort of been taught that compassion or kindness it does look a certain way, and oftentimes it will, to be fair. We talk about it as a kind gesture, a compassionate act towards somebody. But that can be misunderstood in the sense that the the other person, if it is to do with somebody else, right? Like Harold said, it can be. It doesn't have to be to do with another person necessarily. But the other person might not necessarily perceive it as compassion. The most common example I can think of is not giving a drunk a drink, right? We talk about that as sort of enabling, right? It's not always true, but that person, oftentimes, people in general, when we don't give them what they want, their first response is, that person's being mean to me, right? But from the other person's perspective, that might be the kindest, most compassionate thing they can think to do in that moment. So it won't always look like the world's version of an act of kindness or an act of compassion. So I just want to put that in there, Harold, before I go any further.
I think you take us to a good spot here, because it's common, one of the kind of, specifically with what you're talking about, when people are in their sort of their small self, and they want to stay as a victim, and they want to stay in their little space. Often when compassion comes knocking, compassion doesn't, how do we put it in coaching terms? We don't get on the court, right? Like you don't have to enter their story about how things are or why things are. You can just bring the compassion to the as an offering.
Yeah.
So with your drunk drink one there, well, actually, that's Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one because if somebody's already drunk, then they're not even going to know we're talking about that.
Yeah, it's not a perfect example, obviously, but it is a common one
Mm.
that people can recognize.
Because I think one of the things about compassion that kind of separates it from a lot of other things is the felt sense of it. Anyway, you get um, like if a little kid comes to you and is hungry, it just pulls at your heart, and you're moved to give them food.
Mm.
Like it just, right? It's not even. It doesn't come from the head at all.
Sure.
Compassion really comes from the heart. And another kind of special flavor about compassion, for me anyway, is it's a sense of unity. There's a real sense of
Mm.
we, like,
Yeah.
as opposed to me and you. There's a sense of we, and it's almost like uh, we're moved into action because of the truth of the we,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
almost
I
like
love I love that.
you don't like you and I over the years we've had conversations many times about whether we have choice in life or whether we don't. And in this sense, with compassion, it's almost like you don't have a choice.
Mm.
Like you like every part of your being knows, unless you zip right up into your head and you're like, well, no, this is just not my problem. This is this whatever, right? It's like your whole being just knows the truth that the two people really, it's just one. It's
Yeah.
just one person.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that because you brought up early on, at the beginning, the was it sympathy? It was the
Yeah,
levels,
sympathy
different
is,
levels, and so that's sort of the opposite of unity,
yeah,
right? That's a completely different flavor because it's not. It's I'm up here, you're down there,
I'm
kind of
gonna
a
help
thing.
you. You're suffering,
So
and
it's
I can be
yeah.
the
So
one.
it's really based in judgment more than it is in love,
Hmm.
which yeah. And the funny thing is, you could do the exact same physical act out of sympathy as you could from a place of love and compassion,
Yeah.
and they would come off differently. I don't know.
if it
I
if it
don't know
was
if you've had that experience before, but I have.
if it was filmed with no microphone, it might just look exactly the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But the feeling, whether you're the receiver or the giver of the two things, is significantly different.
right,
Yeah.
right. And that's
It's
not to say that the other person, like we said, is going to necessarily be aware of of the love. Are they going to feel the love there? I don't know. Not always, but you certainly are stacking the odds in your favor when you're coming from love and compassion. Um, uh, and I like what you said about the element of choice because um, in my mind, at least, what it looks like to me is the only choice is really um, what we call the show "Open the Door to Compassion." To me, the choice is more to leave the door open or not, right? To not shut the door, right? So,
Mhm.
um, in other words, it looks to me like compassion um, uh, and love. That's because they just, to me at least, they look like they go together. Um, that's more of an autopilot kind of thing. That's that's kind of who we are on a lot of levels, or on a deeper level, I should say. And And then there's, like you said, our headiness, our our intellect, our judgments that can sort of close the door a bit to the presence of, or the awareness of the presence of that love and that compassion. Um, so for me, it's helpful to think about it like that, in the sense that it's just there waiting to be either embraced by us, which really is nothing, right? It's just, like you said, it just comes out. It's just automatic. We're just pulled. Our heart is pulled. Um, or we can shut down to it. That's really the only thing we've got going there, which is a very real thing, right? Because you could look around and be, it's easy enough to say, oh, love and compassion, those are natural states. But if you look at the world, and the way that people behave, well, that's not a reflection of that. So there's something else going on, right? So clearly we are disallowing that compassion, at least some of the time. Some of us, some of the time. Probably all of us, some of the time, to be fair. Um,
And for me,
and so,
it's interesting. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was
With
finished.
the door, actually, when you said that, because my experience of compassion, either being whether I'm moved from compassion or not, is whether or not I'm down in my body
Yeah.
or whether I'm up in la la land in my head. So it's almost like, with that title, it's almost like it's a trap door, like it's a door that's in the floor, and we're either up in the attic in our heads, just looking out at the world, pretending we're like above everything, or we open the trap door, jump down, and boom, there we are, ground level with the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah. I got, you know what? I just got an image in my head of being up in an attic, sort of strategically trying to avoid a trapdoor.
Yeah,
Right.
which
Because
we do.
to me, it looks like, it doesn't actually always look like this, but it more and more it's appearing to me as the effort is in not being compassionate, right? It doesn't look like that because it's so familiar to us. If you're in that place in your life where you're not being very compassionate, or other people aren't being very compassionate to you, um, it can feel like that's the easy thing to do. But my experience is there's a lot of activity that has to go on in the mind for us to ignore, um, sort of the truth of who we are in that sense, which to me it looks like compassion. Um, and so that is, there's not necessarily any, like, we will be drawn to action, but there's not necessarily anything to be done to create compassion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Right.
Yeah, because you can't. You can't manufacture compassion.
I knew you were going to say that.
You can, it's you can sink down, and sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes your heart just gets cracked and you're just there. You are. But for those of us who often, get trapped in our heads and our thinking, you can actually, sometimes it takes some work to just sink down, use the breath or whatever to get down.
Right.
Because compassion is a way of being, like, the head isn't really, the only part of the head that's kind of involved in the situation is in the sort of, what kind of tasks do I do to make this happen? So in my earlier
Sure.
example, you've got a child who is really hungry, and your heart connects, and then your head is like, okay, then the head is, we use it as a tool, which is all it is. Our thinking mind it's only a tool. That's all it is. Just like any tool, hammer, chisel, whatever. We use our tool to be like, oh, okay, so now, yeah, how do I do this? It's like, oh, well,
Right.
go to the cupboard or whatever. and do the thing, and then we move from the heart, but we do use the tool, but we're not living in the tool,
Right.
and
Right.
experiencing and moving through life from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's what just came to my mind, Harold, is the topic of forgiveness kind of comes to me when I contemplate compassion. And for me, at least, probably not for everybody, but for me, they have a similar flavor in the sense that forgiveness is almost an avenue, is part of the undoing of whatever's in the way of compassion. And so I was kind of thinking about, like, because we're sort of taught it's a good thing to be compassionate to people that are even being awful towards us, which is which is a big ask, right? It's and compassion may not be the right word in this. It might be loving. It might be non-judgmental, right? Or whatever it is. But there's some kind of seeing. Gosh, how do I want to approach this? Because to me, it really looks like the only thing that can get in the way of us being compassionate towards really anybody and everybody is our own judgments, sort of ego judgments, right? About and resentments might actually be a better word. And so it's pretty much impossible to be compassionate and resentful at the same time, I think. I've
Mhm.
certainly not experienced that. So if anybody out there has, please call in or email us and say, hey, I know what that's like. But I'm pretty sure they're mutually exclusive. Um, and there's something about it might not be compassion necessarily, but maybe the love behind compassion takes a different form. Um, but there's this undoing of whatever's swimming around in our head about judgment, about, oh, it's so awful this person did this to me, or I can't believe it. Um, and then we're back to the conversation of levels, right? And whenever we're in the conversation of levels, we're in the conversation of victimizer. Um, and so I'm going to bring it full circle back around to the conversation of unity, right? When we can see we are all in this together, um, on multiple levels, right? In the physical form, right? On a very worldly level, we're all sharing this planet together, right? And then, of course, you could take that a little bit deeper into some metaphysical principles about oneness of mind and that kind of thing. And so, to me, oftentimes compassion becomes a function of seeing the unity that's already there. Um, and really, in order to see that, we just need to get out of our own way for the most part. Just and you and I, Harold, have talked a bit about in the past willingness, having some willingness to lay down or set aside something that maybe we've been holding on to in our mind. And when we're willing to do that, we can um, experience more and more compassion for ourselves and other people, and love too. Whatever word you want to use there. Um, but it's difficult to do that unless and until we're we're willing. We kind of cultivate a willingness to not hang on to that victim. It kind of comes back to that a lot, doesn't it, Harold?
Mm-hmm.
The conversation of victimizer. Yeah, go ahead.
So I like to just check in with myself,
Mm.
and where am I? And I can actually feel it. It kind of travels up. I'll use my hands. So it travels up, and when I'm up in here, when my energy is up here, I have like a dismissiveness to others'
Mm.
suffering. It's like, yeah, well, of course, I mean, look what you did. Of course, of
Yeah,
course it's like that.
you
Like,
got yourself
duh.
into this.
Yeah, you got yourself into this mess, and there's nothing, right? It's just like, yeah, that was dumb. Um, so then when the energy, and you can feel like when the energy comes down in here, then all the sort of the judgments are sort of lighter or non-existent,
Mm.
and there's just a real sense of you're just present with the person's reality just as it is. And a really important distinction also is compassion is when you're willing to just be with someone in their reality,
Mm.
and in no way, shape, or form do you have an intention to change their reality, right? Because if we're like, oh, this poor person, I'm going to save them, that's not compassion. Then we're in that form of sympathy, but we sometimes cloak it in a veil of compassion, but it's actually got that sympathy flavor where I'm going to now save this person, or I'm going to be the one. And sometimes it
Mm.
comes from the other way too, right? Where the other person is like, I need to be saved. I need to be saved. You need to save me. And obviously we don't use those words, but the flavor and the feel and the sense and the energy is, that something needs. And so the other person can sometimes create that tier that exists with sympathy as well. So that's something, one of the most challenging practices for me, especially earlier. It's a little easier now, but especially earlier, was being present with someone without wanting to fix or change or save them. Because
Mm.
my sort of wiring is as a savior, like, oh, I can say I can be the one to save them. And I am wired up very deeply in that way. So for me, that has been one of the biggest areas for me to work is, can you be completely with someone from your heart and allow them to be exactly as they are? Like nothing
Right.
needs to change. And for me, what happens then is uh, then I'm bringing the presence of compassion,
Mm.
and it's just there in the shared space, and it has an opportunity to work in ways and on levels where, sort of beneath the whole structure
Yeah.
of their
Right.
uh, of their save me-ness or what have you. If that does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what comes to mind? Just another way of saying, I think what you said is we kind of let go of any kind of attachment to outcome, right? And we're just being with that person. Um, I think I might have brought this up in our last conversation last week, actually, but the words come to me frequently. But the phrase from A Course in Miracles that everyone is either expressing love or calling for love, um, and it doesn't matter what it is, the response is the same. And to me, that's kind of what compassion looks like: is just show up in a place of love and see, if some kind of behavior shows up from a place of love, and what that would look like is not being attached to the outcome, then it does. And if it shows up as sort of inaction, then that's okay too. It's really a lot about, I think you just said it, Harold, the sort of the presence of compassion, or that being, that essential state that's behind the behavior or the act. That's really what's important, because that becomes a conversation of cause effect, right? It's not the behavior. If you just do things that you think are compassionate, you might be doing them from a place of, like you said, Harold, trying to save people or fix people. And usually that's from a place of, I want to fix them so that I can feel better about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can not empathize their pain anymore. I want their pain to go away so I don't have to continue to relate to it. Right? That's not compassion. It's not wrong or sinful, but it's not compassion. It's different. And it's worth looking and saying, you know, where am I at? Like you said, Harold, it's a great indicator. Am I up here? Am I down here? It's usually pretty simple.
It is very simple,
But
yeah.
if we've been not looking in that direction very long, then it might not feel very simple. So there can be a learning curve as far as our facility for the awareness of where we're at. Are we, because we've been numbing out for a while, and that's okay. um,
Because
so yeah, yeah,
most of us live in our heads most of the
sure,
time, right? So it does take practice to sense into, where am I? And reflecting back, through experiences and looking back at past experiences and past models. Like for me, my mother was a phenomenal model of compassion. She just lived sort of the saintly life. Like she lived in service of others. And I had no clue what I was witnessing when I was young, of course.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
and she's passed now, so it's not available now. But uh, now I mine that history now and continue to revisit, um, her expression of compassion and in the world, and it's constantly a way of inviting myself also into that.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. So what's coming to mind is the sort of the flip side of things. If you if you're out there and you feel like you don't have enough compassion directed towards you in your life, a great place to start is with your own compassion towards others. Because there's an idea in the Course in Miracles that says, it's a principle really. It says, ideas leave not their source. So while you might think it's directed towards somebody else, you get the experience of compassion. You don't need other people to be nice to you. I mean, sure, it's nice. I mean, I'm not going to turn it down, but if you feel sort of victimized, right, by the world, and like there's not much compassion in your life, the the best place to start is with you, because that's really the only place we can go reliably to find it. Because other people they're doing their own thing. They're largely a lot of people in the world are largely caught up in their own suffering, and that uh, doesn't manifest in itself as compassion. And But that's not where compassion comes from, our own experience of it, because it's a beautiful experience. But it starts with us. It starts with our own mind. And, like you said, Harold, the mirror. The world is a wonderful mirror for our experience of life. And it looks like it's out there. It's almost always actually inside the mind. And so, as hard as this can be to hear, if you're not experiencing much compassion in your life, it actually means you're not very compassionate in your life. That doesn't mean that being compassionate automatically equals people doing things that you like, but it does mean you get to experience love and peace and compassion more and more and more, which is really nice, by the way.
There's a
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, Harold.
Obviously, and our regular listeners know that I'm a fan of David Whyte, the Irish poet who lives in the States. And he has a CD called Poems of Self-Compassion. And the first poem he enters into is a poem called Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And the opening of it is, you do not have to be good. You do not have to be good.
Ooh,
You
I
do
like that.
not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And what I love about that's just the intro, but what I love about that poem is how it invites us into that space of our heart. You only have to let your body, the soft animal of your body, love what it loves. Because we can't be in our head if we're letting ourselves love what we love. So as you say, go out in the world and be compassion, and then you will be in the presence of compassion. Because it's common for us to, we're humans, so we get into these things where we're like, I just like, it's woe is me, and I just don't have enough of whatever. And the thing about compassion is, when you sink into it, it really is, you are entering the space of we. You are leaving the place of me and you. You're leaving that place. If there's any flavor of me and you still, there's a little bit of the hot, selfish attic air weeping its way down into your heart. Because when you're fully immersed in the heart, you're immersed in the we. And when you're in that space, that's, our selfish story, it just dissolves, because we're in that space where we're allowing the soft animal of our body to love what it loves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. I'm gonna have to listen back to that part, Harold.
David Whyte, I'll send you the track, but
Yeah, I
his
love
reading
that
of it is beautiful.
I love that you don't have to be good, quote unquote.
Yeah.
It's probably not in quotes, but it might as well be.
Because that's, and I can't remember Mary Oliver's history, but the second line about you do not have to walk on your knees and repent for 100 miles, right? Like, there's that real heady flavor of judgment that isn't there when we are being compassion. I'm taking, I think I told you this off air, but I'm doing this 8-week Qigong class, and we do these sound exercises, and one of them is about opening the heart, the fire, the heart energy, and And our instructor Sherry says, when you're in your heart, you're in the place of no judgment. And I said, that is exactly the experience. When you're truly and fully coming from your heart, there is no judgment. There's just this presence, this we-ness that exists.
Yeah.
And it's you can't really talk about it much because it's start breaking it down, but that's the kind of feeling is that we-ness.
Yeah, you know what comes to my mind when you say that is one of my favorite definitions of the word namaste.
Mm.
A lot of you probably heard me say before at some point, not actually on this show yet. I don't think
Not
so.
today, baby.
Today's the day, Harold. Today's the day. It's actually on the back of my business cards.
Mm.
But one of my favorite definitions of the word namaste is I honor the place in you where the entire universe resides. I honor the place in you of love, of truth, of peace, and of light. And when you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, there's only one of us.
That
And
is lovely.
as one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. And I love that because to me, that's what compassion, that's what love is that collective we. Um, uh, and it's a beautiful place to live from um, more and more of the time. Uh, and that's the universe calling.
Hang on, I got a
they
call from God coming.
they want your words to copyright them.
Yeah.
I can't remember where I first. I think I might have first heard that definition from Michael Neal, but it didn't come from him of the word namaste. I think I can't remember the source, to be honest with you. If I find it, I'll cite it on Facebook. But I just kind of go back to the judgment bit, right? Because that's really, to me, it just is sort of a self-imposed obstacle to compassion, right? It doesn't look like it's self-imposed, to be fair. That's why it's sort of an issue, right? Is because we can't see that it's in our own mind is where it exists, is the judgment. But it's actually not the judgment itself, in my experience, isn't really the key to it. It's our justification, our anchoring and justification in the judgment. That it's warranted, essentially, right? Is what justification means. It's based in this real and meaningful thing that's happening in my life, and it's a real meaningful thing that's going to stop me from being compassionate or loving or peaceful or any of those experiences. And in some ways, we kind of have to look at that. We don't have to, but it can be valuable sometimes to take a peek at that, the justification part, and just notice it and be willing to let it go eventually, right? You don't have to do it right away. And I think you and I, Harold, actually talked about in the past, even seeing that it's something to do with us is a huge step in the right direction. that it's in our own mind, as opposed to there's some kind of real obstacle outside me to compassion, to love.
Mm.
Because if you can see that, boy, oh boy, are you in good shape. because then you can start to let go more and more of that judgment, and then you get to experience more and more of who you really are, which is beautiful, which is that collective we, right? That's that place in you, that place in me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, we move from the sort of identity of me to the presence of me,
Mm.
and that because that's where the difference shows up, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of the
yeah,
time we spend our lives trying to change the identity of me, um, where what we
yeah,
really need is to sink down into the presence of
right.
what we are and bring that forward.
Yeah, yeah. Just to put some different language to that, I just read a passage in A Course in Miracles this morning that was the heading was self versus self-concept, right? Which is kind of like saying self as the experience of self, the truth of self, the presence. And then we've got all these ideas about who we are. And a lot of times those involve a whole bunch of judgments about
Mm.
stuff of the world, ourselves. Um, you know, really a self concept is made of judgment.
Hmm.
so, so it's like you said, being able to sink down underneath that to get to the good stuff is a beautiful thing, and really the key to experiencing more and more compassion in our lives. You know, a term actually came to me. I don't know if I've read this before; it just popped into my head. But uh, all compassion is self-compassion, because if there is no you and me on a deeper level, right? If it is we, then it's all of our compassion. We all benefit, um, and there's probably immeasurable benefits to that, or good, um, good like God, right? Not good as in repenting, like you said in the poem.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Because like you said earlier, if you're feeling um, that there's not enough compassion coming your way, one way to get that going is to go out in the world and be the compassion. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the experience, because when you sink into it and you you're being compassion, you're allowing compassion to be in the world, there really is a sense of I just keep coming back to it, the we-ness. There's a everything is kind of working together. I'm
Mm.
not doing this. This is not working. I'm not able to articulate this, but
That means it's the good stuff, Harold. It doesn't always play on radio or uh, on YouTube, but it's the good stuff. Usually,
yeah.
when you can't put it into words, you're onto something. Usually,
Something else that kind of just struck me is I might be setting this up for our listeners as like the head is bad and the heart is good.
good
So I
to
just want
good
to,
point.
yeah. So I just want to go back to that a bit, because the experience, um, it feels as though the energy really does. It goes from here to here. But when it moves into the world, it's almost like the whole thing is moving. It's not the heart is moving and the mind is quiet, and it's not the mind is forging forward and the heart is silent. It's like your whole being is moving forward, and there's
Mm.
no separation between them. Like, you're not in that place where you're like, oh, I'm not in my head, I'm in my heart. And uh, that even that sort of us and them becomes a we. When it moves into the world, it moves as one thing.
Right.
So, the,
Yeah.
the
That's
the
a good
distinction
point.
between the head and the heart is, I think it's important, for me anyway. It's very valuable for me because I'm up and down the elevator, wearing out the hydraulics all day, right? Uh, Finding opportunities where it's like, oh, here I am up in my head, and just think. But when you're in like the sort of, when I'm experiencing the deepest movement of this compassion that I know thus far in my experience, it really is everything moving together forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's perfect because it's yeah. There's no wrong way to be, right? There's no sinful way to be in this conversation. Um, I think a similar distinction that I use is between the uh, the ego and the Holy Spirit. The ego's not bad. I mean, it's more of an illusion than anything else, but it's 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 not bad. And we've always kind of got both going on for the most part. Um, now, that's not to say that when you sink into your heart, like you said, Harold, it really does have a different experience altogether than intellect, though. Um, that's not to say the intellect's not there somewhere, um, but it's a different flavor for sure. And it's almost like when you're in it, there really isn't anything else. So it is everything,
Hmm.
right? I think that's maybe another way of saying what you were saying.
Yeah, that's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, and so that yeah, please hear us. We're not making anybody wrong for um, not being compassionate. It's tough sometimes to get out of our own way. There can be some pretty tremendous resistance at times, because we're really holding on to, again, the justification of those judgments, right? We want to be in that, and we want that to be true about us being above that person, or even us being below that person, because we're
Mhm.
guilty and we're sinful, right? um, but once we just gotta let the levels level back out. And sometimes it can be helpful to look at that, but other times that can get you stuck in your head. um,
Yeah, I know for me, when I can't experience the presence of compassion, it's because I'm up in my head and I am hell bent on being right about something.
because we're essentially unwilling, right? We're
Hmm.
unwilling, and that's where that willingness comes in again.
I'm more interested in finding evidence to prove how right I am than I am in sinking down and being that which I actually am.
Right. In which case, uh, totally fine, right? But but
Totally.
notice what you're doing. But notice what you're doing as best you can. See that it's on me. It really is. It's me holding on to that. It's
I am
not
the
whatever that,
source.
yeah, it's not whatever that person did or said, or your dog bit you, or you know, uh, you know, the it could be even be the weather, right? The hurricane wrecked your house, right? Or something like that. Um, it's it's in the mind. There's a whole section in the Course in Miracles called "Obstacles to Peace," and I'm thinking about this conversation, that in the context of this conversation. It's really the same conversation,
Hmm.
right? It's they are our obstacles. We we don't know we put them there because it's basically unconscious, right? Um, for the most part, but we can begin to see that we put them there, and consequentially let go of them, right? Um, I gave you. No, I won't share that example. I'm not. It's going to take too long. So another
That's a
time. I think I might have done it in a different show. So
that's a great obstacle piece, because that's for me, it's like the obstacle is my attachment to being right. That's
oh,
the obstacle.
so beautifully said.
And even when I see it, it's like, yeah, I can see that. But
Yeah.
you don't get, I am actually, on this particular thing, I'm actually right.
Oh yeah, and we all know what that feels like.
I think
That's
we do. Yeah.
anybody who's spent any time here on planet Earth knows what that experience is like. No, you just don't see, right? You know, I'm, I'm right. I'm in the right,
Yeah.
which also in a world of duality presupposes you're in the wrong, somebody else is in the wrong, right? Which is to condemn them, which is to judge them, which is to be an obstacle to peace and love and compassion.
And we're in the us versus them
And the us versus them.
context.
And then we're in the levels,
Yep.
and
And there it
we're
all
back.
is.
And there it all is. It all comes
Usually
to
we're
a head.
usually we're sympathizing for their lack of awareness
Yeah.
or their lack
Or
of
we're
what.
hating or we're hating them for it.
Yeah.
You know? Same thing, different flavor.
Yeah.
Sympathy and hate. Yeah. Um, so I think that's probably a good place to kind of wrap it up, Harold. Any sort of last words, parting shots?
Yeah. Yeah. I always love the parting shot, don't I?
You gotta get the last word.
I
That's the
love it.
best part.
Oh, you know me so well. You can have the last piece of food on the plate, but I need the last word. That's too funny. If you
Oh,
know me, you
jeez.
know how funny that is. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Allow allow the world its invitation. We're constantly being invited to go through the chute in the floor of the attic down into the basement, to be the presence of compassion in the world. It's a constant invitation because it ultimately leads to the truth of our being.
Hmm.
So heed, heed the invitation. Soften your animal body to the invitation that is constantly being offered you, and practice it. And practice being compassionate to the process that you're in. Wherever you are in the process is
Right.
perfect, and it's
Yeah.
it's malleable and changing. We're not trying. It's not a goal like I'm going to get there and then I'm going to be there. It's a practice. We go there and then we come back, and we go there and we come back, and over time we go there longer or more or bigger or deeper, and it's
Right.
it's absolutely perfect as it is, and the invitation's always there.
Beautiful. I couldn't say it better myself. So that's going to be the end of the show, everybody. So thanks for joining us. As always, we love your company. So make yourselves known to us. We appreciate it. Uh, and stay tuned for our next episode. We should be back next week with another live show. And just as a reminder, again, Harold and I, we love working with people, sharing this on a more deeper level, on a more continual basis with our clients and just people we love in our life. And so, if you want to be part of that sort of inner circle, then reach out to us. Again, we're professional coaches, so you can find me at coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And Harold.
You can find me at haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. And I just want to leave you guys again with that namaste saying, because I love it so much. I think it encompasses
Nice.
what the show is about. So Namaste. I honor the place in you where the entire universe resides. I honor the place in you of love, of truth, of peace, and of light. And when you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, there is only one of us. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.